What is up, fight fans, and welcome to an all-new edition of the Scrap Report. I'm, of course, the Dana White of Ringside Intel, Jason Burgos, and with me, as always, is the Grandmaster of Hate, the Lord of Loathing himself, the one and only Ant Walker, Senor ABW. How are you doing? Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. I feel very, very hateful today. Just a lot of vitriol built up in my soul, and I can't wait to share it with the viewers.
I mean, they come for the hate, and we've got to give it to them. And we've got a lot to talk about. Of course, obviously, wherever you're listening, you're watching, please like, share, hit the subscribe button, comment, when we get along with this topics. So the topics, we're going to talk a lot of UFC 308 Fallout. A lot of interesting things came out of that event, which is now a little less than a week away from when we record this. We're also going to talk about an interesting idea that was thrown out by Jake Paul and why Conor McGregor is not fighting. That's different than what a lot of people are speculated. We're going to talk about the numbers for Francis Ngannou's return for the PFL. Not great. I mean, not surprising that either. We're also going to talk Sean O'Malley, Tuah girl, the couple that we've all wanted and we all need. And of course, we're going to talk some Mark Zuckerberg AI nonsense and the UFC rankings. But first, UFC 308 Fallout. Of course, in the main event, Max Holloway falls short to Ilia Topura. It was a rough night for the diehard fans out there with Max Holloway and Robert Whittaker. Just tough endings. These last fleeting moments in elite status for two just lovable, great representatives of the sport. First, we got to talk about Max. We're going to get to Ilia, of course, but Ilia's going to be talked about a lot by us for the next few years, is for sure. But when it comes to Max, where should Max go next? I think this pretty much put a nail in the coffin. He's not going to be a champion again at featherweight. No disrespect, but he's had a bunch of opportunities. Lost to Alexander Volkanovski a few times. Definitively lost now to Ilia. Does we finally get the move I've wanted for a long time? And that's he goes to lightweight. Maybe he makes a run at lightweight title, or do we get what Dustin Poirier suggested? A BMF tournament that the world wants, including him, Max Holloway, Dan Hooker, and Justin Gaethje. Where do you think Max Holloway goes next in his career?
Please give us Max Holloway at lightweight. It's time. It's really time. I think the door is officially shut on a featherweight title. And as cool as of a Cinderella story it would have been for him to beat Ilia Topuria, now he's sort of left with this no man's land from two directions. It's like you could fight Volkanovski for a fourth time, a guy who definitely had your number towards the end of that series, and risk a fourth defeat to him, and if you win, you get the chance to get knocked out by Topuria again. It just doesn't seem like a win either way you look at it. So lightweight is where there are more exciting matchups to be had of relevance. There's no reason why they can't have this four-way or even 8-man BMF tournament at the lightweight division and it not factor into the actual undisputed title. Those things can coexist. So lightweight is the best move for Max Holloway, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense. I think you give an excellent point in that, in terms of like the winner of the tournament can move on. It can parlay that into a lightweight title shot. And that'd be the interesting thing. The winner of that tournament would be worthy. They've beaten all these other great fighters. They're the BMF champion, and they kind of do BMF versus lightweight champion, which has its concerns too. Because like if it's Islam wins, is like Islam really a BMF? I mean, he is amazing, but like I get it. He is a BMF, but then he's not to me, because BMF to me is the guys who are dogs. They're just nasty. They're gonna go in there, they're gonna fight, they're gonna give the fans what they want. That's not really Islam style, which is nothing wrong with that.
Islam just beats the hell out of you, and that's sort of what people want, is somebody who's just beating the hell out of you. And he beats the hell out of you to the point where it's domination, and it's not this back and forth dogfight, because as of right now, no one has been able to give him that.
Yeah, not fair enough. But either way, going that route, he's got to move. I mean, I wanted this years ago. I think when he lost to Dustin Poirier in the second fight, when he made that move up, it disheartened him, and he's like, okay, no, I can't do it. And that's why I'm hopeful with that Justin Gaethje win, this recent loss to Ilia, that we finally get that, because that's where he's got to go. Why do all this weight cutting? Let's see how he could be a lightweight. I think he could be an interesting threat. That said, now for the champion, where does Ilia Topuria go after the win? They clearly were setting up him versus Alexander Volkanovski, I guess. Is there a case to be made that it should be Diego Lopez. I think Diego Lopez is as interesting fight. I think Diego Lopez is a fascinating threat in that he is fairly well rounded. He can finish you on the ground. He's dangerous on the feet. Is he more technical than Ilia? No. Is he going to be a favorite? No. Is there a case to be made, or just he's not a big enough name, and it just on a business level, UFC is not even going to look at that at the moment?
Well, I think you're hitting it. You're answering the question within the question there, because it's just about his name. Diego Lopez is not a name that's going to attract a lot of attention, but in my opinion, he's the most deserving guy in the division to get a title shot, and it's certainly not Alexander Volkanovski. Like, Volkanovski just got laid flat by Topuria, in February. I saw with my own eyes. I was in the arena and looked at this with my own two eyes. I know exactly what I saw. No, this does not belong next on the schedule at all. I love Volkanovski's story. I love him as a fighter. I like the personality he puts out there. He's someone who I would like to see as champion, especially over Topuria, who is quite cringeworthy as we've gotten to see him develop into this public persona. But still, Volkanovski does not belong in the cage standing across for Ilia Topuria with the featherweight title on the line. That's it.
Yeah, this is just like classic UFC booking, and we've seen it many times. I mean, honestly, even Max Holloway's route to this position, he stood on the shoulders of Jose Aldo and then stomped on him when he fought Aldo, when Aldo wasn't really the guy he used to be and stuff like that. And that's just how the UFC always does it. I'm not surprised they're going this route, but I'm not that interested. I think a lot of fans are not going to be that interested. It just doesn't have the sizzle just because of what he just did to these two legends. Yeah, I mean, this is the nature of when you have a fighter that's so good. He's a pound for pound, top 3, top 5 fighter in a division. He's just so far and away better than most of the fighters. But yeah, that's probably what we're going to get. Moving on from.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to step on your toes there, but I do think business wise, there's an opportunity for the UFC to make a big name out of Topuria. If you have him against a Diego Lopez, you have him against an Arnold Allen or any other guys in the featherweight division that are knocking on that door, you don't favor them over Topuria just from an X's and O's standpoint. It doesn't look like there's anybody that's really going to give him a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great chance to build up a dominant champion who's opening up doors in another market.
That's true.
Like a guy who's got like one of the most famous, I guess he's famous. I don't watch soccer, but some guy with all the tats that was out there and walking with him outside the bus and all that sort of stuff. That guy's like a big time deal, right? Guys like that, and like the Madrid FC and all that, and they're posting on their social media about Topuria. Man, that is a huge market to tap and build the man up. Build him up, and that's your business opportunity right there. We don't need to force Volkanovski into a 3rd consecutive knockout loss. No, thank you.
Yeah, and it's this assumption that they're looking for kind of the next UK star and this kind of thing. I mean, Volkanovski could just be the next big European star. It's obviously the Spanish market is big, but there's a whole bunch of countries around there that'll still be interested. And he's got the the matinee idol looks. He's got the charisma. He's got everything you want. He's an easily marketable guy, especially to a European audience more so than an American audience. Speaking of Europeans. Khamzat Chimaev, one of my favorites. Man, I mean, I understood the doubters. There was obvious doubt, and with good reason. Robert Whittaker is a legend at middleweight. He's fought well, gotten some big wins recently. Khamzat had a tough fight with Kamaru Usman, and it makes sense that people doubted him. But man, just utter dominance. Took him just a few seconds to get a takedown, and he just never let go. Robert Whittaker could just not get that man off of him until this guy dislocated his teeth and put his bottom teeth back into his mouth. Oh my God, gross. So Khamzat, what's next for him? I mean, he's as marketable as a star, which is amazing because he's not a native English speaker, but he speaks enough, and he's so charismatic and is in a McGregor kind of way. He is dominant. He's getting the finishes, which is key for a marketable star. He's got to get a big name. If he's not going to get the title shot, and we're going to get a whole hum Sean Strickland versus Drake Du Plessis rematch, which it seems like it's going, which I don't think they should do. What's next? Does it have to be Adesanya? That's the one a lot of people calling for. That's the big money fight. I honestly think that's a bigger fight than any title fight they can do, just because Izzy's such a big star. Is it somewhere like Nasruddin Imavov, a guy who's pretty deserving, kind of close in the rankings? He's been red hot. That's a guy. Maybe it's someone like Amar Vittori, maybe someone that he can beat, but it's a name who's fought for titles. Vittori's an interesting threat, one that he was kind of looked at as one of the best, if not the best grappler in the division. Good solid boxing. Where do you think he go? Or maybe there's another. What do you see for Khamzat's next fight?
I mean, I want to see him fight for the title next. All these other fights just don't do it for me. The way he absolutely dominated Robert Whittaker. Is there someone that seems to have the answer to the questions that Khamzat Chimaev is putting out there? I don't see it. I genuinely don't see it. Yeah. And also, too, with Robert Whittaker, you don't have much further to go up the ladder. Like, that's kind of it. Yeah. Like, you got Robert Whittaker, you got Israel Adesanya, and then you've got Strickland and DDP, and you've got the 4 champions that are still active in the division. So that's kind of it. If it has to be somebody, I would say Adesanya. And that could be the best case scenario for the UFC. If Khamzat blows the doors off Adesanya, then it sets him up for an even bigger chance to fight for the title. And if Adesanya pulls off the unthinkable and he is able to dispatch of Chimaev, can you think of a better way to hype up a rematch for Izzy with either Strickland or DDP? Yeah, I don't think there's a better build up to that. So if it has to be somebody, it should be Adesanya, but I don't even want it to be Adesanya. Put Khamzat Chimaev in a title fight now, and Strickland can go sit down somewhere and, I don't know, read Mein Kampf or something. I don't know. But he does not belong in there with DDP right now when you got Khamzat Chimaev out there destroying a legend like Robert Whittaker in the way he did.
And it's a shame, too, because Sean Strickland has a fair case. Split decision, very close fight, but he's just made himself such a unlikable guy. He's an unlikable guy to us. There's obviously an audience that likes the guy, and he's got a fan base. And UFC would not push him as they have unless there is some interest in him. I definitely can see them just going with that because this weirdo has a fan base on some level. And then you kind of like, this is the weird time where making a title fight isn't necessarily the best financial route because you've nailed it perfectly. If he beats Adesanya, he's beat one of the greatest of all time, maybe second to Anderson in this division ever. And he's a bigger star. And when he goes into that fight and maybe becomes champion, it's even bigger for that. Or the person that if he loses, whatever, it's a big one for them. Or if Izzy wins, he's one of the biggest stars. He gets the momentum from Khamzat and then takes that into a bigger thing. So it feels like there's more money opportunities for the UFC because if you don't put Strickland in this fight, then what do you do with Strickland? Strickland and Adesanya? Who cares?
That could be a serviceable main event for a fight night card. That could be a good co-main for a pay-per-view. That's obviously a fight that can be that rematch can be marketable on its own. So I wouldn't just dismiss that idea altogether. I'm just dismissing the notion that we need to see Sean Strickland in the title fight right now. And you're right. He did make his case, right? He had a close fight with DDP where he lost the belt, very close fight, and then defeated Paulo Costa, although that fight really sucked. He did win. He did his job, and he got out there and got the W. So I understand his case, but come on, man. Yeah. Come on, man. He dislocated and cracked the man's jaw. Put Khamzat in there. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, and also another thing that hurts Sean Strickland, other than his personality, he's not an exciting fighter. Like that's the hard thing that you're out there saying, "Oh, I'm getting this next time." It's like, man, like you just like it's hard. It's kind of like what was going on with Bilal. Bilal just forced the issue and he had to get a title fight. But like Strickland still lost to Cannonier a few fights ago. He lost to this guy. He lost, like he's had losses. Doesn't have this crazy winning streak. And then you add on, he's just not excited for it. Like every fight goes to a decision. It's a walk down jab fest. Like, it should be Khamzat, but no, in the UFC, I don't think they'll do it, unfortunately. Talking about another title fight in our last bit of UFC Fallout talk, UFC 8308 Fallout talk. Magomed Ankalaev gets another win. This is the guy that people have called about. They want to see him fight for the title for like the last year. They've been talking about him versus Alex Pereira for a while now. is he the guy? I'm not even going to say does he deserve a title fight, because he does. He deserved it already, but he didn't get it. But I'm going to go with the direction of, is he the guy that's really the toughest test yet for Poatan? Why or why not?
I'm gonna say he would be the toughest test for Poatan. He's certainly the most well-rounded out of the guys that Pereira has fought and could potentially fight at the light heavyweight division, and he's beaten, some people that that got within sniffing distance of title shots. So yeah, he probably should have won the belt in the first place. When that fight against Blachowicz that went to a draw, like he probably should have won that fight. So yeah, this is the guy that deserves it. If does he win? I don't know. I'll tell you this though, he's not going to go out there and be able to have the kickboxing match with Pereira that he just had against Rakic. Like there's going to be two different levels of kickboxing. Rakic is not anywhere near the kickboxer that Poatan is. So he's got to come with a different strategy. I would assume that he knows that, and he's certainly capable of getting some smothering wrestling going, and that's what it's really going to take to stifle Poatan at this point.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the match, and the reason I'm fascinated beyond just like what you said, that Magomed is very well-rounded fighter, is that the toughest test, oddly enough, all these good fighters that Poatan has faced, including at middleweight, one of his toughest tests to date was Jan Blachowicz. Still, Jan Blachowicz was the fight that went to his decision. My wife felt that Jan Blachowicz won. I remember watching that night. So and then he's also. Alex has also, while he fought Yuri, which is a legit 205er, he's sort of fought smaller 205ers. Jamal Hill's the guy that if he gets on a different diet, he could probably be a middleweight if he wanted to. He fought Khalil Roundtree, who's, again, a guy that probably could be a tweener, probably be a perfect 195er. He's not a large 205er, not a big guy. This Magomed is a big, legit 205er who's got man strength, wrestling, similar to Jan Blachowicz. And despite all the things, Pereira should be the better striker, fast striker. He had a tough time, Jan. So I think Magomed has a similar skill set, maybe better striking, maybe not better wrestling. But then again, maybe he uses wrestling more because that's what we think. But yeah, it's a fascinating fight. I think he would be the toughest test, and I'd love to see if Alex can pass it. If he passes it, man, you're starting to get in a place where no one's going to be better than John Jones at 205, but maybe he's in the discussion with the Rampages and the Rashad Evans and Chuck Liddell's is one of the best light heavyweights ever, along with being in discussion as one of the best middleweights of all time. There's very few people that can do that. Like outside of like Randy Couture is the only one I can really think of. Like, yep, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, maybe one of the greatest light heavyweights. But even then,
Cormier,
Cormier too. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
so that's people. Yeah, it's the fight that has happened. Like it's the guy that deserves it. He has to fight. But that said, please again, wherever you're watching, listening, like, share, subscribe. What do you think? What should be next for Magomed? Should be getting Alex Pereira? Should what's next for Khamzat? Where do you think Max Holloway go? Please let us know in the comments. Moving on from there. So I covered this on Ringside this week. Jake Paul, of all people, and it kind of slipped under the radar, and I just had by chance found it. And it was a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, actually, from his podcast, an episode with Francis Ngannou, where he gave his thoughts on why Conor McGregor is not fighting. And we've talked about it on our show. The assumption by most in the MMA fan base is that Conor is just doesn't really want to fight. He's just using the spotlight to keep his name out there, to keep relevancy, and now pinky toe broken. That was enough to take him out of the fight. It doesn't seem like he really wants to fight. However, Jake Paul had a different view of it. He thought of the idea of maybe the UFC really isn't trying to get him out there. Conor has said it's the UFC holding things up. Well, most of us go, yeah, whatever. But Jake Paul's thoughts were that the UFC is doing their TV media rights deal. Now, their deal with ESPN ends next year. The way it usually goes in the industry is these new deals are negotiated a year before so that you transition from the new one into the old one. So the idea Jake had was that if you have Conor McGregor, who's one of the most famous fighters on the planet, not one of the most famous UFC fighters, one of the most famous fighters on the planet, and you have two fights as a bargaining chip with the ESPNs or Netflix, or all these big things, you can get a bigger return, and you can say, yes, we will get you can get Conor McGregor on your platform for two fights instead of one fight. I thought it was an interesting thing. It does make some level of sense. What are your thoughts on? I feel there's a little bit of both, but I think Jake may have an interesting point because media rights deals are huge. They're billion-dollar deals. WWE, which is controlled by TKO and the same company as UFC's control, got billion-dollar deals from Netflix and USA. These are important things. And to use Conor McGregor's name in getting the most money, it makes some business sense.
Yeah, I believe I'm trying to think if we talked about it on this show before and I threw that theory in the air, or did I write an article for Ringside about that theory?
Yeah, maybe that, yeah.
Because I certainly thought this months ago, saying, hey, this, I'm certain that there's a lot of booger sugar. That's the reason why Conor isn't active. There's a whole lot of foolishness around him and his name. Mm-hmm. However, the UFC has deep pockets and is very influential, and they've made miracles happen at other times. Why couldn't they make this miracle happen? And quite frankly, when you've got a media rights deal coming up that's worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, that Conor McGregor bargaining chip is pretty serious.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't put it past the UFC at all that's an option, because the negotiation window opens, I believe, in January. This January is when they can start the negotiating, with the deal expected to begin the following January in 2026. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. Yeah, this makes all the sense in the world to me, and I've been screaming this one for a while now.
And then look at how to just show how big Conor's name is. Look at how BKFC has used his name. Just having him at press conferences, he's not even fighting, and he brings attention to their brand, elevates their brand. He's just at press conferences, holding belts he doesn't even own, holding belts he's never maybe going to fight for.
Screaming at the weigh-ins like a maniac.
Yeah, at the weigh-ins, doing, play-by-play, whatever, not like he's just there. And they're getting value out of it. So imagine if you're a company that can take it to a platform and say, we can give you 2 Conor McGregor fights. That's big in the fight game industry. That's big money. So, yeah, I think Jake, of all people, a lot of people talk bad about Jake, and, he's got some odd political choices, of course, but kid's smart, kid understands business, and you don't become famous off of no boxing skills without outstanding business savvy. And the guy's a smart businessman. Moving on from there, talking about business, Francis Ngannou had his PFL, long-awaited PFL debut a couple of weeks ago. Dominant. He looked like he never left. Dominant first-round victory over Renan Fajeda. Unfortunately, Battle of the Giants, early reports are that the event just did over 100,000 pay-per-view buys. It wasn't as expensive as UFC, which is usually $79.99. Their event was $49.99. That total ends up being around 500,000 in terms of profits. Now, in comparison, obviously not UFC numbers, but for example, like UFC 302 with Poirier versus Makhachev is rumored to do around 500,000. So that's a good gauge. That's probably where UFC is at most events. Obviously, with Conor, it's bigger than that, but so there's still a good 500,000. I'm 400,000 short of what UFC does on average. They had Cyborg on it. They had a lot of good fighters on it. What's your thought? Is it reason for panic? Is it, I don't know how you don't panic, or is it a sign maybe they need to go in a different strategic direction? Do they need to do ESPN Plus strictly events and give people, a subscription service on the app? Like, is it just like a wasted effort for non-UFC brands to continue to do pay-per-view events? Or maybe I'm overlooking it. Maybe, based on their funding, that's a good number. 500,000 from just the pay-per-view is a good number for them.
I'm not sure what they feel internally about 100,000 buys. I mean, I'll say this first. Maybe I have a touch of dyslexia or something like that, because when I first saw the headlines, I thought it said 10,000 buys. I was like, oh, wow, that's really bad. And then I just moved on with my day and didn't even click on the article. But now it's at 100,000. Okay, that actually makes you feel a little better about it, because that's not great, but it's not horrible. We've seen worse. Like, we've seen boxing pay-per-views do around that, if not worse, and for bigger names and stuff. So I think it's okay, I guess, considering their funding and whatnot. But also let's think back to this was a while ago. This was some months ago, and I did write a couple of articles on this. I believe it was Don Davis did an interview with Ariel Helwani where he talked about their strategy behind their super fights division, and trying to get Nate Diaz and some other big names to fight, and they brought up Ngannou as well, along with Jake Paul, and they're saying that some of those names they don't intend on making a huge profit from. They're okay taking some losses or breaking even, but about building up the brand bigger and just sort of drawing attention to PFL as an entity, as opposed to just trying to get these, like Affliction did with these one-off events that they're trying to rake in a bunch of money and then they burn into a money pit. So if they're looking at it from that perspective as an investment on the future, then that's pretty decent, I'd say. I have no idea what Ngannou was paid. We do know that Ferreira made like 2 million at least, because that was a stipulation of Ngannou's introduction into PFL, that he wanted his opponent to make like $2 million. So I don't know what, and I don't know how far Saudi Arabia is going to just let this go until they say, okay, we don't want to lose any more money. But if they're okay with just breaking even or making a small profit, it's not too bad, I guess.
I actually got to make a correction. You're right. It is 10,000 buys.
Oh, never mind. This is the disaster.
The money is still the same.
The
money is still the same. 500,000 is still the same. 10,000 is a rough number. But again,
never mind everything I said.
We have to factor in also is that they're backed by the Saudi PIF. Like, so they're not a normal company that's like, we got to make money off everything. I think everything, your point, maybe, my apologies on the number, but your point was still right. If Don Davis saying they don't necessarily, they can take losses, this is why, because they're backed by a, what's that, 12-figure, like amount of money, almost like a 11-figure amount of money investment, company or whatever that's from the Saudi government. So it's a little different thing. And I think the one big downside on that number 10,000 actually is it doesn't say a lot about Francis, in that you would think that having the Tyson fight, the Anthony Joshua fight, that would have increased his name value. And the fact that it still wasn't enough to increase his name value along with being a UFC champion, it's unfortunate, and I feel bad for him and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a weird thing. I almost feel, do you feel like these companies need to stop doing pay-per-views so they can avoid these stories of just 10,000 buys that makes them look so bad to the fan base? And they really need to just start having these events only on ESPN Plus and giving fans an opportunity to watch their product for free or with a subscription.
You see, I don't think the perception of it really matters all that much, because at the end of the day, fight fans are going to want to watch fights.
Yeah.
Like, for someone who just really wants to watch fights, I don't think they really give a damn if it's 10,000 other people watching or 100,000 other people watching or 100 million people watching it. They just want to see what they want to see. So I don't think that should really factor into the equation a whole lot. But looking at whatever numbers they have behind the scenes, if 10,000 buys makes this financially viable for them in any way, shape, or form, what are their plans, then cool. I guess it's a win. So what if it gives Dana some new soundbite and he says something crazy on the podium after the Contender Series, because he's going to do it anyway.
Yeah,
he's going to find something anyway, because no matter what they do, they're not going to equate the numbers that the UFC is consistently pulling in, and that's just the state of the game right now. So whatever's going to make this company work the way it wants to work, the way it intends to work, fine. If it's 10,000 buys, okay.
Yeah, I'd really like to see. I don't understand why boxing and combat sports hasn't followed this, but whatever. These combat sports always seem to come along far slower. But look at WWE. WWE is a huge billion-dollar company. They're not doing pay-per-view events anymore. They're giving WrestleMania away on Peacock for like $7. Like, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. But you know what? The UFC and the WWE. I mean, WWE more so than UFC, but the UFC is that of combat sports. Like, we're talking about decades of brand recognition. We're talking decades of legacy and people who have literally grown up watching it. PFL is a very, very new name out in the game. So there are people who literally grew up watching the UFC, that they are now 20 years old and they've watched UFC with their dad since they my son, when he's older, he's gonna, oh, I remember watching UFC with my dad when I was 3 and 4, that's a different thing. That's when you have the wiggle room to start doing things different than your competitors. There's a reason why the NFL can do what it does and put on games on a plethora of free channels that are going on at the same time all over the country all the time, and still raking billions upon billions of dollars because they're just that big of a brand. No other fight entity is doing that. And PFL certainly shouldn't operate as if they are. So they have to play within those margins.
I get that, and that's a fair point. But I mean, even for the UFC too, because we're in a world where you can watch Oscar-nominated movies and a bunch of other content for like $14, like $13 with Netflix. You can watch elite shows and everything on Hulu. Like the market has gone in that direction. And also, I don't know how much of an effect it might have had in the PFL, but recently BKFC boss, Dave Feldman, he talked about maybe moving events, pay-per-view events to their app because people are stealing stuff. So not only are people illegally streaming, like you don't have a huge audience. Like that's why Turkey Al Sheikh, he's talking about $20 events. Like the audience doesn't want to pay that amount. The UFC can get away with it, but even then, the UFC less Connor's fighting. When our formative years as fans, UFC was like getting near 1 million all the time, like because they had fewer events, so it mattered. But when you're giving away so many events for the most expensive amount it is, I'm sure they're not getting the same buys. They can do it, but if you're a fledgling company like PFL, why not be the one who gives the deal? We can give you good fights for a deal. And that's how you sell the brand. And then maybe you have special events where you go all full on pay-per-view. But like asking a small audience to pay money, it's just silly nowadays.
You brought up a really good point, man. I mean, I think it just goes to show the pay-per-view model is dying.
That's what I mean. Like, stop
the pay-per-view
doing
model
it.
is just dying in general. But the UFC, WWE is like this behemoth all of its own. But the UFC did something when they negotiated their ESPN deal. And that is, if we're to believe the numbers that were reported at the time, I want to say it was Luke Thomas that first put this figure out there, that apparently every ESPN Plus pay-per-view, it's as if the UFC sold like 300,000 buys in the more traditional pay-per-view system. So if that's the case, if they walk in the door, if Dana and Hunter Campbell, they walk in the door and they know, okay, we're going to get this amount of money flat regardless, that gives you a whole lot of wiggle room, because there was a point in time where 300,000 buys was pretty damn good for the UFC. And they averaged somewhere in that neighborhood. It wasn't like those million pay-per-view buys were quite frequent. It's been maybe at the most 10 or 15 times that's happened out of the 300 something pay-per-view events that they've had. That's not a common thing to break 1 million. So they walk in the door knowing they're getting a guaranteed amount equivalent to 300,000 buys. That is a big jumpstart on the competition.
But that's maddening. Why are you charging $80 for events? That's more reason you should be charging $20, UFC, like the greed. And then Dana, like, well, that's what ESPN's charging. Yeah, right. Just like Francis Ngannou is a bad guy that you're going to cut after 2 fights. I don't buy it. It's just greed. And that's sad. Well, like that's why they're making billions now.
Exactly. That you said it right there. This is a multi-billion-dollar company that pays its fighters a laughable margin of the revenue and continues to defend this practice regardless of how many people speak out, regardless of multiple class action lawsuits trying to fight it, regardless of pending legislation that could introduce the Ali Act in the MMA. Like they're going to do what they're going to do if it allows Dana to import snow to his driveway every year. That's what's most important.
We could talk about this. We could do a whole episode on this, but we have to move on. Of course, wherever you're watching, listening, like, share, subscribe. What do you think? Should pay-per-views not be far cheaper at this point? Should you just subscribe to an app and just get pay-per-views for PFL, UFC, whoever you want? But moving on, this is to the topic. I was looking
Can I just preface this by saying that journalism has officially died today?
Oh, Continue. No, not at all. We got to cover all bases in this game, and that is the story that the one and only Sugar Sean O'Malley got a little bit tipsy on the Oxycontin. He was on Twitch. He was looking for weird people to talk to on the Twitch calls and wanted the people to rap. And he started calling America's darling herself, Hawk Tuah Girl, aka Haley Welch. Unfortunately, Hawk Tuah Girl did not answer his calls. Was like, what the hell is Sean O'Malley calling me for? But that said, we're in a time where Taylor Swift is one of the most shown things during NFL games for the Chiefs. Taylor Swift and the NFL, it's a money-making machine. Is Sean O'Malley and Hawk Tuah Girl not just the perfect MMA couple? No, we're not going to have like J-Lo and Adesanya. We're not going to have it like Rihanna and John Jones, something that makes sense. No, in the MMA world, for this audience, for this fan base, Sean O'Malley, Hawk Tuah Girl is Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, no?
I mean, like MMA is like the Temu version of real sports. So yeah,
right?
this is if you ordered Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce off of Wish, you would get Sean O'Malley and Hawk Tuah Girl. That's what you'd get. So yeah, this is perfect. Like, what are we doing here?
We're doing great things. This is 2024, baby.
Like I'm not understanding the whole hype around this girl. Like, you know, she's not a bad looking woman, so I'm not gonna sit there and like talk bad about her. Nothing. She's done nothing wrong. Like, but she's famous because she made a joke about theoretical oral performance. Like, we have no means to verify that the skills are worth all this hype. I'm sorry. Like, I grew up in the Mr. Marcus Superhead tape era, so I know quality when I see it. You know what I mean? What are we doing here? What is
imagine a Fight Pass, the Sugar Sean and Hawk Tuah relationship hour, and they had couples come in, because you know Sean O'Malley, he's an interesting guy. He's got an open relationship even though he's married, so you know he can dabble all over if he wants.
He's doing Oxycontin. Like, I mean, this is we're barely bearing the lead here. Like, the main thing should be that a recently dethroned UFC champion was booted out of his mind on Oxycontin and went on a texting rampage. That is more the story than Hawk Tuah Girl.
Isn't that but like the state of MMA when you got a Conor McGregor who's, you know, on blow all the time, that Sean O'Malley on Oxy is like, yeah, I'm not surprised he's on Oxy. Yeah,
no, I'm not surprised. I mean, this is a guy who was holding a baby talking about how he wanted to try heroin. Like, come on, bro. What are we doing here? I ask again, what are we doing here?
We're covering good news. That's what
I mean. I'm sorry. Now, if you said now you people out there that are watching right now, you might know what I'm talking about. Now, if you said that he got high and he started like texting Jasmine Cashmere or something, I'm like, all right, I see you, fam. You hit up Jada Fire, like, I get you. I understand.
No.
Other than that,
No, this is the best thing. I really hope they can get together and have a wonderful relationship. They're cage side at UFC pay-per-view events, you know, and they're hosting couple shows and relationship shows, and you know, and then we catch them there. They're on an episode of Caught in the Act, Unfaithful. You know, you just think the whole menagerie of options. I'm hoping for the best, really.
And I may or may not have at one time potentially almost been recruited by Jasmine Cashmere for some filming.
Oh,
that's another story.
that's for the OnlyFans version of the show, everybody. We'll start that page soon.
Another story. That's another story.
Moving on from there.
That night when I sent that message.
It's hard to top that. So we'll go to our last topic, and that is, I want you to explain the fans. So it was a story about Mark Zuckerberg and Dana White working about, because Dana White's been just complaining up a storm. You guys don't know how to rank. You guys don't know what you're doing. John Jones is the greatest. So he's working with the old Facebook overlord, Mark Zuckerberg, about having AI handle the UFC rankings. Inform fans more about this storyline. And also, I'm curious what you're going to do. What are your thoughts when Dana White finds out AI also thinks John Jones is not the pound for pound best right now?
Oh God, he's gonna like do like Will Smith did on iRobot and just start like blasting the Tesla robots in the head. This is just pure silliness. Like, Dana White's frustration about rankings I find very interesting, because the UFC matchmakers tend to ignore them anyway.
Yeah.
They they don't really adhere to them, but so much. It's simply just a talking device. It's just a tool to use promotionally when they feel like it.
Yep.
That's it. So what is the big deal? And then really, if it's that big of a deal, just keep it in house.
Yeah.
Just keep it in house. Don't turn it over to Skynet. Don't don't turn it over to guys like us who like do this and like know what we're talking about. Just go in your war room where you got the little maps, and every time you see that map when he does a video that he's going to say something absolutely ridiculous, just go in that little room and just say it is whatever you say it is, and you're going to match people according to whatever the hell you feel like anyway. So why is this a big deal? And quite frankly, like, AI has shown, like, there was somebody ran this at one of the Contender Series scrums, I believe it was. A media member said that they ran Chat GPT or some other AI thing they asked it about the top 10 rankings, and it was like Leon Edwards and Volkanovski and like these champions that all don't have the belt now. There were the top pound for pound guys. Like, it was an Aljamain Sterling. It was stuff that was just wrong and outdated. So this is what you're turning it over to. Like, AI is going to have its problems too, and you're going to ignore it anyway. So why do we care?
Yeah. It's just so silly. And he can get away with being so anti-media, and it's just frustrating. But it's like, then don't leave it. AI do like they do in college football. It's a coaches polls, and the coaches vote on it. Yeah, there's some thoughts of favoritism for their team, but it's just, we'll give it out to all the MMA coaches or whatever, or something like that. And, they're the ones who know the sport best. Maybe they can give the best answer, since you don't feel the media who watches and covers this thing for years know what they're doing. But yeah, to go the AI route, it's just so lame. And I think it's just an excuse so he can rank it himself. It's just silliness. And I mean, there was a time that the rankings did matter, and it was a great time. They need to make rankings great again, but that's not going to happen, unfortunately. And I think that's a perfect way to end the show. Yes.
You just had to throw that in there, huh?
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
But as always, please, again, wherever you're listening, watching, please like, share, hit that subscribe button, comment, let us know, as always, our usual thoughts. But for this episode of the Scrap Report, I'm Jason Burgos. He is Ant Walker. Until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.